I'm super excited about today's guest. Her name is Denyelle Bruno, and she is the CEO of Tender Greens, and it is one of my favorite restaurants. And
Awesome.
I have like I've loved it for many many years. And in full disclosure, you and I were sitting on a panel maybe a few months ago. I was moderating the panel of these really super successful women, and when I heard you, I basically did it because I saw your name on the list of who's going to be there, and I was like, oh my god, CEO Tender Greens, and that's basically why I wanted to be involved in the thing.
Oh my gosh. I
Yes,
didn't know
that's how
that.
much I love the restaurant.
Wow.
And then I met you, and you blew my mind because you were so normal and chill, and you didn't even like have an air about you. Like as people would think, like the CEO of a company, and we're going to get into your background and all the other amazing places you were. And like I just like really liked you. I loved your attitude. I loved the way you kind of carried yourself and spoke with people. And I'm just really happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a lot of pressure. I
Yeah,
hope
I know.
can meet your expectations.
I know. Well, listen, you already did. You've met and you've exceeded my expectations before the podcast.
Done.
So let's just start with I guess some background. I mean, obviously, I said that you are the CEO of Tender Greens,
Yep.
which for people who don't know what Tender Greens is, it's a how do you say it? It's a fast casual.
California fast or fine casual restaurant that has food made from scratch daily.
Right, and it's very healthy, and probably one of my, like I said, one of my favorites. So, how did you become like you're a woman, obviously, and obviously, and you've had a very successful career in a very male-dominated world.
Yep.
Before even Tender Green, let's even backtrack. You were at Apple, one of seven executives to, I guess, run the retail part.
Create the retail.
Create
stores.
the
Yeah.
retail under Steve Jobs. So let's
Yeah.
start with that. Like, how was it to work with Steve Jobs at Apple?
So it was, I mean, it was probably a lot like you would imagine. I mean, he's a genius. I didn't work with him on a daily basis, but I did interact with him several times, and incredibly smart, passionate man with a strong vision, also a complete asshole.
Right.
But I kind of have this rule where if you're super smart, you're allowed to be an asshole. Like if you're an asshole and you're not smart, to me that's unacceptable.
I agree with that. But you
So
kind of have a little bit more permission for somebody who has.
yeah, because you know what? For him, it wasn't really about ego. It wasn't just like I want to be right, I'm important. It was he had a really strong vision for what he thought the company should look like, what the product should look like, how we should represent ourselves, and he didn't want that compromised. And if he felt like it was compromised, it was like he would just it would almost be like he would internally, like combust or something. So it wasn't just that he wanted to be right. It was just that he had this vision, and it was so pure that he really wanted it to come to life. And he didn't want people to prevent that from happening. But it wasn't really just that he wanted to be a superstar. I mean, I think that happened, but that wasn't his goal. That's I don't know his inner thinking, but that was my impression.
Did you have any kind of? Is there any examples that you can think of, like of an interaction where his perfectionism was at its like that you saw it happen in real life?
Yeah. So, and it's funny. I mean, because I mean his outer appearance. I mean, he would wear like you're wearing cut off shorts. He would wear black t-shirts and cut off jeans or jeans with like holes in them, and it wasn't even meant to be like a stat or a style thing. It was more just probably just easy because he just wore the same thing every single day. But there was one day, and I brought this up before. There was one day when so I was part of this group of 7 people, and we built this store.
Did he pick you? Was he the guy that said, "I want these 7 people to create the retail"?
No, I went through a pretty elaborate interview process with a lot of people, and really, I think the person who had the final say in who the 7 people were was Ron Johnson.
Okay.
And so we built this store inside this building, and this building was on Bub Road in Cupertino, and it was totally secret, secured building. And we had been iterating on this store for almost a year before anybody even saw the first version of it. But he would come in every week and walk with us and talk about what he liked and what he didn't like. And this is, I mean, I don't know if it's obvious to everyone else, but this is before computer stores were cool. right? I mean, like before we opened the first Apple stores, you bought computers at like a Best Buy or at a CompUSA, and it was all about stacking boxes. Maybe the product was out and visible, but often it was just stacked boxes. So the idea of sort of boutiquing out a computer store was really different.
Right. That's what made him so innovative and a genius in a way.
Where exactly. Just he had the ability to see things really before the rest of us
Absolutely.
did. So it was, very boutiquey, and the computers were laid out and things like, he didn't want us to ever show any wires. This is before wireless. There were no wires were allowed to be seen. So every single thing we built, we had to make sure the wires weren't visible. The floors had to be perfectly polished. I mean, everything needed to be like completely stacked up and like perfect lines. I mean, everything just needed to be perfectly neat and orderly. But one time, and we would even do things like, what do you think the material for this shelving? And one time when we were all walking and we all kind of just followed behind as he pointed things out, and he said to, I believe it was one of the carpenters. He said, I don't like the grain of this wood. I don't like the direction that the grain is going. Can you try again, but make the grain go the other direction? And the carpenter said, oh, well, trees don't grow that way. And he was like, all right, then you're fired. And the guy kind of looked at him, and we all just kind of startled, like, is he? And the guy was paused and kind of like
he's joking,
like you're
maybe?
joking.
Yeah.
And then he goes, I'm not kidding, get out of here. And so the guy left, and then we just kept walking through. So I don't know what ended up happening with that guy.
See, to me, that seems like absurd and crazy.
It is absurd and crazy, but the bigger message is
he was so particular and had such a vision.
He wanted somebody to bring his idea to life, right?
I get
So it's
that.
like if you say, I want this to happen, I can either say, well, no, that can't happen.
Right. You didn't like the word no, maybe,
right.
too.
I mean,
right.
no, if you're an entrepreneur, you're running a
Right.
business, the word no is just grating, right? So, possibly he could have chosen different words. I don't know if it would have mattered, but possibly he could have chosen different words. Maybe he could have said, I think I know what you're going for. Let me try something. And you know what I mean? It's like, we've had to do that, right? I've had people say crazy things, and I'm like, I want to say you're out of your fucking mind. Can I cuss?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
say whatever you want, 100%, but you can't, right. So you're saying that the carpenter didn't maybe have the wherewithal to kind of just manage him a little bit and be like, yeah, let me look into it. Even though
Or
maybe
just,
it wasn't even possible.
Or like, I get it, or okay.
Let me
or
try
something
again.
Right, exactly. Like here you are in front of people saying no to somebody who has this amazing vision and is putting, billions of dollars towards it. So I think it felt a little bit like it was about that, but it also felt like maybe a bigger message.
I get that. Now, so he was a micromanager then. If he was coming in looking at every little detail like that, I would think that you'd have a lot of interactions with him, even though...
Yeah. I didn't report to him directly, so he probably really micromanaged Ron. I mean, there were very many times when we would all be in a room and he would get phone calls. But my sense was that he had sort of pet projects. So when he was really excited about something, he really focused on that before he moved on to something else. And also maybe after somebody sort of proved that they could handle it. But I think there were certain things that really got his attention, projects that got his attention. But there's no way he could micromanage everything because we were at that point such a tiny part of the bigger business.
Right, because it wasn't even existing yet.
Yeah, I think he was just focused for a time when we were building it out.
What I find interesting is before, of course, now, like I said over and over again, that tender greens, but your background with all these companies, all of them had very strong brands. I mean, Apple was one of them. Peet's Coffee was another that I saw. Dry Bar, which of course is, blow dries for your hair. What was the other couple that you had? Like it was, what was it called? The Design
Within Reach.
Design Within Reach. These are very, very brand, like very
iconic.
Good with like iconic building, beautiful branding. Yes. Now, my question is, were you a part of the branding, or do you pick companies to be involved with that have a very specific feel and touch and feel? And
yeah, it's a great question. I would love to take credit for all of those brands.
I would too.
It was absolutely me. But no, in fact, somebody even made a comment the other day about, that I've been very successful in the companies that I've worked for. They've either been turnarounds or they've had massive growth. And, what's the secret to my success? And I literally said, I just choose really good companies. So if
That's a talent right there.
well, I think it's a talent. But if I got a phone call to go work for a company where I didn't totally believe in the product, or I didn't think the brand had like either a cult following or the potential for a cult following, I wouldn't go, because I think it would be very, very hard for anyone to take a business where the product is substandard or where the brand is mediocre and make it a wild success. So I have joined these companies definitely at different stages. Some before they opened, some in their early stages. Some, Peet's I joined when they were 40 years old and they wanted to refresh the brand and open another 200 locations. So I've joined the companies at different times in their maturity, but it was always with this notion that like I was the customer there. I love the product personally. I love the brand, and I can see that the brand had a strong trajectory. So that would be my selection process.
So what are you looking for exactly? So they already had some feel of an ability to kind of have some kind of like trajectory in the business, but like what exactly? Maybe is it too nuanced for you to say this and that? Is it just a feeling that you got, or?
There's a little nuance to it, but I mean, part of it is just that best in class, whatever product it is, whether it's coffee or computers or blowouts or food, like best in class.
Yeah.
Another thing would be that there's some disruption quality to it. There's something different about the business. It's got some major differentiator than other businesses like it. It's not another sort of Me Too business. Progressive company that really wants to appeal to maybe a younger or more aware audience. California is amazing, and I've really lucked out because I happen to have been able to stay in California. I was born in California. That's not always the case for people, but California definitely is helpful. And then a brand that just has the capital to grow and the investors and the board that really wants to grow. And that's usually my sweet spot. I can come in and say, okay, I can scale this.
So Peet's Coffee, let's just use that as an example. I'm a big Peet's drinker as well. I love it. What did you see differently in someone like them, for example? Apple, people know Apple. We'll get to the other ones later, but what did Peet have specifically?
So it's interesting. So where I was working right before Peet's actually was a company called Pure Beauty, and I worked there. It was sort of a high-end skin and hair company
What did you do
that
at that
had
point?
about 70 locations. I was the vice president of stores there.
Okay.
And I was hired to turn it around from this guy, Steve Hudson from a group, Cameron Capital, bought the business with the idea that it was this great business that had just been run into the ground, and he wanted somebody to sort of turn it around. So he hired me. I also thought there was a lot of opportunity, turned the business around within a couple of years, and sold it to Regis hair salons in Minneapolis.
Oh, Regis. I remember them from
back
when.
So shortly after I started that job, I got a phone call from Peet. So I grew up in LA, but I lived in the Bay Area for about 15 years. I did both undergrad and grad school there. And the whole time I lived there, I was a Peet's fanatic. Actually, there's a name for it. It's called a Peetnik.
That's really the name for it?
That's really the name for it.
Oh, okay. I never heard that.
Yeah. So I was a Peetnik, and during most of those years, to buy Peet's coffee, you actually had to go to a Peet's coffee store. You couldn't buy it in the grocery stores.
Right, I remember that too.
So I was a little bit of a coffee snob, and so I would go to the Peet's stores and I'd buy my coffee there, and I would get it ground specifically for my machine, et cetera, et cetera. So it was one of like a handful of things that I was sort of into. When I took the job at Pure Beauty, which actually was in LA, and I had to move from San Francisco to LA for the job, I got a phone call from Peet's within like 3 weeks of me starting that job saying, hey, we have this position. We would love for you to interview for it. And I was like, oh, I just took this other job. I just moved to Southern California, but let's stay in touch. And I literally stayed in touch with the recruiter there for the 2 years I was working at Pure Beauty. So when we sold Pure Beauty to Regis, they offered me a job in Minneapolis, which is like hell no, I'm not moving to
Oh,
Minneapolis.
I know. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, so I know
Oh,
Minneapolis, and
okay.
and the video guy's from Minneapolis.
Wow, you guys are brave. So see, if you guys are from there, then you were born with something that I was not.
Listen, you don't have to say it twice. I know. I'm living in California for a reason.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Exactly.
Right?
So, so I literally called Pete's back up and said, "Is there any way you'd still hire me? I don't know if that position's still open or a different position, but I really want to work there." And they hired me, and they moved me back to the Bay Area, and I joined. The funny thing about Pete's, so to answer your question, the thing I loved about Pete's is I really feel like I still think it's the best coffee. I'm a dark roast coffee drinker, and I think it's the best coffee. So I liked it. I liked that it was sort of the Starbucks alternative. I loved that it was sort of created in Berkeley. What I didn't really totally realize at the time until I worked there is actually Alfred Peet created the Arabica dark roast coffee movement in the country.
Oh.
Actually, Starbucks started by using Peet's coffee beans. They weren't even roasting their own coffee.
Really?
So they bought Peet's coffee for a long time. So when
even
I
know that.
joined Peet's, I was just like, this is the coffee brand. And I thought they were so amazing. But they were operating in such a tribal mentality. The funny thing is, even though I think when I got there, they had maybe 100 locations. They had been around for 40 years, but they had no process or systems because they were afraid that if they got too operational, that they would turn into a Starbucks.
Right.
So
They would lose that edge.
they would lose that
Yeah,
edge, the thing that made
totally, I
them
understand
cool. And I think probably people had come in before me and they really tried and they failed because they were like, oh, you're just too corporate-y. So I think because I had come from Apple, they sort of trusted me with the brand a little bit more.
Oh my
like,
God,
you
I'm
came from
sure.
Apple, what could you possibly do to hurt, our brand? And I mean, as you've observed, I mean, I'm not the typical corporate-y person.
Well, 100%. That's
So-
not at all, and that's why I think that in itself, you fit there so perfectly just from an outside perspective, me looking in, right? Because you seem like the brand. You seem like you would feel that, like you seem like the brand, like you.
Yeah, no, and that's
your
and I feel
essence
like
is the
that,
brand,
and
yeah.
I feel that way, and you know what? That is kind of what these brands. That would be the through line is that I feel a certain sense of like I get the brand, I get the consumer, I know what they're doing, I know what they're trying to do, and I can help, and that's kind of my vibe.
So, what would you say your superpower would be when these companies come to you? You mentioned a little bit, you touched upon a little bit as like you come in and you turn it around a bit, like you're a turnaround person that helps or expand the companies. Like I don't think 10 Degrees is a turnaround, obviously. What do you think that your greatest superpower? It could be one, it could be two, it could be 10 things that you do really, really well.
I think if I were to boil it down to the most important thing, I would say leadership.
Right.
I think the way I lead is very specific. And I think for these scenarios and these types of businesses, I think my leadership style really works. I hire the smartest, best people. I try very hard to hire people who are smarter than I am in every category. And then I get out of their way, and then I consider my job to just move obstacles out of their way. And I believe that we're all going to succeed together. And I believed in what some call servant leadership before I even knew what servant leadership was, which
What
is
is it called?
basically servant leadership.
Oh, servant leadership.
And I'm not.
What is that? So we know.
Servant leadership is basically that my entire job is to make the people who work for me successful. It's not their job to make me successful. My job is to make them successful because then by definition they're gonna make me successful. And so, and if you talk to anybody who works for me, it sounds very sort of touchy-feely. I'm not a touchy-feely person either. I'm just super transparent.
Right.
And it's sort of, I mean, I guess it's amazing, but a little bit sad that my superpower might be sort of transparency and honesty, but it's true. And I think so many people are surprised by that they appreciate it. And they never want to work for anyone else because they're like, I know what you want. And you're very clear about it.
And you're authentic. That's what I said at the beginning of this podcast. Like why I gravitated to you, even like if you didn't know I did, but I did, was that like you had that authenticity, that realness that like would make people want to be around you. That like I guess people, I feel, don't see it very often, unfortunately, right? So when they do see it, it's really appealing and they want to be around it. And so, okay, so you're saying you're saying what makes you a good leader is that you hire really well. You hire the
I
smartest.
hire really well, and
What else?
and I'm a good communicator.
You're a good communicator. Okay, so how do you delegate then? Like, what is the process to be a good leader? So if someone's like an entrepreneur, starting out, they're an entrepreneur, they're like a new CEO.
Yep.
How do they hone their leadership skills?
Well, I mean, obviously, different people have different styles that work for them. For me, it's really figuring out what the intention of the company is first, right? What's the company setting out to do? Is it a turnaround situation? Is it, Apple, when I got there, Apple computer sales were 4% of all computer sales, so the market penetration was really low. So a big part of the mission there was just to awareness of the brand and the quality of the product. If it's, creating a new brand that doesn't exist, if it's a new way of doing things, if it's like Tender Greens, we want to grow the business and we want more people in the world to eat real, whole, good food. So it's like, what is the bigger sort of vision of the company? What's it trying to accomplish? And so once you understand what the company is trying to accomplish, you figure out what the resources are, what the required resources are to accomplish that. And that's, capital, that's people, that's systems. And then you go out and find the people that are really great at that thing. So when I went to Tender Greens, I'll be honest, I actually replaced the entire executive team within the first 2 months.
Really?
Yeah. Because they were great
Amazing.
people. And I, if any of them are hearing this, I mean, I am not a big fan of allowing people to stay in roles that they won't be successful in. So I'm just very authentic about it. And I just say this, this is what we need here. This is the job that's required. And it's not your strength.
Right.
And so go find that thing and be wildly successful somewhere else.
It's that honesty, though. You just finished saying that honesty is what makes you successful, right?
Right.
Like,
so
you're seeing something, you're observing what was working, not working, and then like you're just saying to someone, listen, like this is not what you're good at. Go find something that you're better.
Go find something else.
Yeah.
So, so the team that was there helped bring the brand to where it was, which was great, iconic brand, but it wasn't the right team to take it to the next level. So I brought in a new team of people, and the guy I hired. So the one person I kept was the CFO, and she's also a woman. So
good.
female
Yeah.
CEO, CFO. She's recently dubbed herself sort of the nuclear cockroach because she's like been sticking around. But she's incredibly skilled, and we have a great relationship. And she actually was going to quit when I started because she wanted the job. And she was like, I really wanted the job. And she was like, I wanted the job. You got the job, and I'm happy for you, but I'm gonna leave and go somewhere else. Right. And I was like, okay, I understand.
Right.
And then we got to know each other even before I started working there. And before I started, she called me up and was like, okay, I'm going to stick around. And
right.
I was like, great. I was like, we're going to do amazing things. So she stuck around. But then the guy I hired for marketing, also like me, didn't have a restaurant background. He was the head of branding for Adidas. And so he just, he had this energy and this vision and this idea and this way of building a brand that I was like, okay, he's the right person. And I also like that he didn't come from restaurants, because what I learned in coming to the restaurant industry is the restaurant industry, generally speaking, is sort of woefully behind from a technology standpoint, from a marketing business standpoint. So I wanted somebody who had really been part of building something amazing. And just kind of built the team that way and said, like, what are your ideas and how can we make this work? And we have a meeting each week where we talk about our plan. At the beginning of every year, we create our strategy. We figure out what that looks like. One mistake I see everywhere, and even when I came to Tender Greens, I was like, let me see your strategic plan. And there was like 30 things. And I was like, oh my God, like this is too many. Get it down to like 3. And they were like, 3? That's impossible. I was like, get it down to 3.
Right.
And so really figuring out what the most important things are each year and getting people to align to that. But, at my meetings, I have a lot of really strong personalities, a lot of people who are really good at what they do. And I like when there's friction. We have like knockdown drag out sometimes at our meetings.
You do?
Yeah. Yeah, because I like it. I think it's awesome. And I mean, even directed at me. because I'm like, look, if I have an idea, and I'm like gung ho, and we're gonna go do something with that.
Are you passionate about it?
I'm passionate about
Yeah.
it, but it's a bad idea. And you're like, well, you're the CEO, so I'm just not going to say anything. That's a disaster.
That's so true.
So I'm like, if I have an idea and one of you is like, probably not a great idea, you are required to say something.
Right.
You are required to say something. And I can veto it, but if I don't have the opportunity to at least hear your concerns, like you know how you go around, I mean, I go around all the time to stores and restaurants and places, and I'm like, whose idea was that? Or who let somebody get that through?
Yeah,
or, you know, all the time. And
yeah.
I'm just like, it's like my biggest fear that, you know, to do something and have people be like, did nobody think about that?
Exactly.
So,
true.
so it's like, I'm not alone going to be able to identify those things, but if I have a really smart team, somebody's going to be able to catch it.
Absolutely. And also what you just said was interesting. And I tend to agree that you pick someone, the head of marketing is from Adidas, not from the restaurant business. Because do you feel, and maybe obviously you do, that if you're good at something, it doesn't matter what industry, you can take that same skill set and plant it in a different industry, right? Because if you're excellent at marketing, then that's your skill. You can take that and do it somewhere else, right?
I think there are translatable skills that really play. I mean, obviously, if you're trained to be a doctor, you probably shouldn't
right.
You know,
I'm not saying
build a house,
but right, exactly.
But yeah, but I
or
think
an accountant,
I think there are some really important competencies that translate across industries. And I think if you're a smart person, and I mean, look, I say my skill is leadership, but I think my skill is really just like connecting with people, you know, connecting with the consumer, connecting with the employees, and so that I can take anywhere, right? So I think with marketing, it's about understanding the consumer. It's about understanding how people respond to things. It's about understanding the landscape. It's about understanding what people respond to. It's about understanding what noise is out there and when you should, like, you know, turn up your volume or turn it down. I mean, I think if you know those things and you have a sense of it and you're good, then yeah, you can take that from place to place.
So what makes you, okay, so then how did you become this person, right? Like taking this skill set of being a good leader from place to place and company to company, how did you become this person? What's your what's your background before you became the successful professional, basically?
Yeah, so what I would say is I probably have had the really rough skill set my whole life. And so really for me, it's been like a lifetime of like honing it and polishing it and massaging it. But like the raw me, like out of the womb was probably not that different than this, you know, more like
how you are now,
articulate me.
Yeah, right.
But you know, I think I was definitely one of those kids early on that was, as Tina Fey would say, bossy. You know, I was bossy. I had strong leadership skills as a kid. I was, you know, I was very controlling with my friends. So I think I just naturally have those tendencies. And you know, at my age, I really believe, and I have two young kids, and I think there's a lot that are just like, you just are born with, and that, you know, I think the natural environment sort of shapes what you're born with, but I think we're born with certain things. You innately have certain things.
You had these qualities.
So I was always like that, and then sort of outspoken, opinionated, a little bit controlling. Also,
I don't know
fun.
anyone like that.
Also fun and interesting.
Yeah.
I think I was very playful. I feel like, you know, probably a less good, or
you
maybe
don't seem stuffy at all. That's the word I like. Not
No.
at all. You may have a strong personality and, you know, maybe controlling, but like you still seem like cool, and like you seem very like, I hate this word 'cause it makes me sound like 100 years old, hip. But you do seem like you're hip. You know what I mean?
Thank you. I feel like I'm hip.
Okay, good. Thank you.
But you know, I'm not controlling anymore. I think I was controlling as a kid just because nobody was able to do anything right.
Right.
So I had to tell them how to do it.
100%.
You know, obviously, I was
Listen,
making them better.
that makes sense to me. I mean, I don't know anybody else, but I get it.
that.
I totally get it.
I can see that.
So then, what is your like? Besides that, like you were saying off camera, like, you know, you had some struggles or what have you as a child that maybe have like shaped who you are. For sure. So I didn't want to ask off camera.
No,
I wanted you to tell me now.
No, this is all live, which I love.
Exactly.
So I had these, you know, this personality as a kid, and then my parents got divorced when I was 12, and my father was a homicide detective, and he was a bit crazy, alcoholic, had some violent tendencies, womanizer, really, like, actually a really fun guy. I mean, this, like, honestly, just like a really fun guy, but probably not amazing to be married to.
Well, I was going to say, you don't hear that as an occupation very often. Like, very rarely do you hear, like, I'm a homicide detective. I was going to say, that's a cool job. It sounds like.
It's a cool job, except for, you're looking at dead bodies every day, that part.
But it's more the fact that it's not your everyday, hey, I'm an accountant. Hey, I'm a teacher. Like, a homicide detective, like, that's going to make me inquire about, like, really?
100%.
Tell me what's happening.
Totally.
Tell me the worst thing, the best thing. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like,
I mean, he was a very interesting guy, but
how can he do the job if he was an alcoholic, though? Didn't that kind of
oh my gosh,
fuck with his ability to?
I'm pretty certain it's like a criteria for the job.
I would probably imagine that
probably,
too, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure. I can say this because he died a week ago. Which is a weird thing to say, and it's shocking it's on air. But I haven't talked to him in 30 years. But
wow.
But I think that my parents partied a lot and had a lot of friends who were very social. They did drugs, and I'm sure they were all things that he probably got from work.
I can't even believe your dad died a week ago. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm not.
I'm
not psychotic. I'm laughing, but I actually really had to process this. So I hadn't spoken to him in 30 years. My youngest brother developed a relationship with him about 8 years ago and started reconnecting with him, but I haven't spoken to him.
Well, what happened?
So when my parents got divorced, we spent time with my dad. My mom had full custody of us, but we had a beach house in Carpinteria near Santa Barbara, and he would pick us up and we would go to his beach house, and it was a really crazy time because this was like 30 years ago, and he would pick up my mom, and he would come pick us up, and he'd like have his Audi sports car, and he'd be like drinking. And my mom would call the police and just be like, he's just picked up our kids and he's going to be driving them on Highway 126 and blah, blah. And they'd be like, I think, he's fine because he was a cop. And back then it was like,
so crazy
yeah,
true. Yes.
Yeah. So they really wouldn't do anything. So she was kind of helpless, which, and now as a parent, I'm like, oh my God, that must've been terrible. But, he drove with like a gun in his what's it called?
In his glove compartment?
Glove compartment, yeah. So she's like, here's this guy, he's been drinking, he's driving on this highway with my young kids, and there's a guy. And so anyway, that wasn't the problem.
That wasn't the problem?
That wasn't the problem.
Okay, what was the problem?
So, we would go hang out at his at our house at the beach, and it was actually incredibly fun. Like, I had a really good time. I mean, he would take me. We would go to like the local liquor store, and he would get like a bunch of quarters in rolls, and then he would buy like whatever he was drinking, probably gin, and he would get me a little bottle of peppermint schnapps. And I was like, I don't know, 12 or something, and 13. And we'd go to the arcade and play video games.
So would you be drinking that too?
Yes. Well, yeah,
so
it's
you
peppermint
were like,
schnapps.
Yeah,
like,
so you were
like a mint.
So were you like drinking with your dad at age 12, basically?
Yeah. It was super fun.
Yeah.
So when we played video games and it's like he had all these quarters. So anyway, so it was fun. So another anecdote, just because it feels like this is exciting to you. There was this time he took me to, and eventually I'm gonna, like, my goal is to someday write a book about this stuff because I think there's something here. But
this is exciting. This is interesting, actually.
He took me to this beach in Santa Barbara. That's a nude beach, and we went above on this bluff, and like. He like brought binoculars, and we just sat on the hood of his car and like looked at nude people on the beach and listened to music. And I was like, this is the coolest thing. So anyway, were you drunk though at that point? Like, I mean, like, were you? No, of course not. That would be outrageous.
Right, outrageous.
No, that would be terrible.
So that's good. So how long was this going on for?
So we had this bond. So we had a lot of fun for many years. But here was the problem. Those things were actually not the problem, and those things also did shape me, and I think in a way that I actually appreciate. The problem was when we spent time together, he would talk a lot of shit about my mom. Like he would just say terrible things about her, and I was very close to her, obviously, as most kids are. And they were like, now again, as an adult, I realized they were totally inappropriate things to say, just really mean things. And so when I would go back when the weekend was over, I would have all this anger towards my mom, and I would be confused, and I wouldn't know how to handle it. And when I started getting older, probably like closer to 16, I started to realize like that this was not a healthy way for me to be interacting with a parent, and that when I'd come home from these visits, I would feel terrible, and it would take me like the whole rest of the week to get over. And so one day I was just like, I'm just not going to talk to him anymore. I'm just not going to hang out with him anymore.
Just one day?
Just one day. And then I didn't. And like he made overtures. He wrote me a few letters because we didn't have cell phones then. But I was like, no, I'm good. Like
and you were 16 at this point.
I was almost 16.
And so then what happened? So he made some overtures, and then what?
So he still hung out with I had two younger brothers. He still hung out with them for a little while, but my mom started seeing somebody seriously, and he just eventually just disappeared.
So then you never spoke to him for 30 years after that?
No. Mm-mm. And so he was hospitalized. So I think he died. Yeah, he died
a week ago.
No, it was more like 3 weeks ago.
Oh,
but he was more like 3 weeks. It was a long time ago, like 3 weeks ago. But like he was hospitalized a week before, and it was kind of like, But the thing is, my brother had reconnected with him about 8 years ago, and they actually have a relationship, or had a relationship. And once my youngest brother reconnected with him, I got to learn more about him. And so my fantasy of him really changed, because when I last saw him, he was this like, good-looking ladies' man, drove a Harley, made stained glass, was drummer in a band, just partier, fun guy.
Right.
And then, so in my mind, he was always that guy, and I was like, that was a cool guy. And then when my brother reconnected with him, I learned that he wasn't those things at all, and he was living in Texas, and there's just we were very, very different type of people in the world, and just our politics, our approach to life, like I got to look at his Facebook page because my brother was
right.
And I was just like, we have nothing in common, and I would rather just keep those memories in this little box and not expose them to this other person that I don't know anyway. And so for me, it was just a lot more comforting and maybe romantic to just keep things there.
Right. But what is the quality in you that you were able to like shut him up? Like, he's your father. It's not like it's like some kid at school,
Yeah.
right? That one day you're able to turn that off in your brain and be like, you know what? I'm not going to do this. Like, he didn't hurt you, right? Like,
No,
at all.
no.
It was just you were having fun with him, but something in you, in your just decided one day not to like talk to him, and like you were able to shut it down like that. What's that? How? What's that quality? And
I guess the quality is like ROI. I
Yeah,
know that sounds super weird,
No,
but
but
like, I think I'm always evaluating the return on the investment of anything. So if I'm putting my like energy into something, then I'm gonna figure out whether net it's positive for me.
So are you an all in or all out type of person,
100%.
right?
100%.
So either you're like, right, so that's what I find interesting. Even like, so you didn't even think, maybe I'll talk to my dad, or like tell him I don't find this to be appropriate, and like kind of and change the kind of a relationship we have.
No, because I'm insightful,
Right? And
and I'm just like, I already could like play out in my mind how that would have gone,
Right.
And I knew it wouldn't go well. Like,
Right.
it's not like that I don't want to give people a chance, but he wasn't the kind of person who would have changed his approach.
Right.
It would have been impossible. So when I kind of played out, okay, so what would
You're decisive.
next step be? It would be like, no, it doesn't make sense.
How I would say that would be good for you in business is that you're extremely decisive.
I am extremely decisive.
And when you make a decision and you stick to it. Obviously, if you could do that with your father for 30 years and then some, right?
Yep.
You could do it with anything.
Yep.
So like that to me is like how I would think it kind of, but how did that experience shape you 30 years later, or like even 20 years later?
So basically, I'm gonna wipe my nose because I'm having allergies.
Oh, go ahead. I've got terrible allergies myself. It's crazy.
I don't know if it's.
I'm on a lot of
you never do that.
Allegra. Don't worry. No.
Yes.
We won't even show that part. They'll show me.
You
for
blur
that
blur it out or something. You don't edit, so it's all.
That's right.
This
That's
is the real deal. Real nose wiping happening here. So how it shaped me is. So I mentioned this in the panel we were on. Like, I don't believe in rules. I don't really feel guilt because it's just like a waste of energy. It just feels like. Like I'm gonna make a decision and then regret my decision, then beat myself up over it, and that's like it seems like a terrible waste of energy.
Right.
So, when
you mean that's not guilt though. That's more like you don't
dwell.
second guess your decision, or you don't dwell on shit that's happened already.
Well, the part that makes it sort of maybe guilt adjacent is that maybe you get more information and somebody's like, oh, shoot, like maybe I shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, no, based on the information I had at the time, that's the decision I made. Now I have new information.
Yeah.
And so how it really has affected me. So you found out earlier to your shock and amazement that I'm a lesbian.
Yes. Listen. Okay. The only reason why I was shocked was because you never mentioned it, or I never saw it. I don't know. I wasn't shocked, but I was kind of shocked just because, I would think that you'd say, I don't know. Maybe I don't know why I was shocked. Actually, I have no idea why. I was shocked. There's no reason why.
I didn't know you had a husband until I walked in.
I know. I mean, honestly, there's no reason. I guess I just didn't know it.
I was actually shocked that you were heterosexual.
Really? Okay. I'm like, maybe some would be. I mean, I don't know. No, it wasn't that I was shocked. I was more just like, oh, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, exactly.
It was more like just in surprise, like, oh.
Right, like I'm Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I would have shown that same type of enthusiasm if you said I was Canadian, because I'm Canadian, right? Or like if you said, whatever you were, it's just because you like, I get very enthusiastic and excitable. I guess I get excited easily.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, well, I maybe I should be more forthright with my gayness going forward.
No.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yes, no.
I'll lead with my gay.
No.
So the
funny.
way this is played out is, so I have a wife and we have two almost 6-year-olds.
You have two almost 6-year-olds?
Yeah, a boy and a girl. They're twins.
Oh.
And we started out with very different parenting styles. And this is not something that we could have ever guessed because we both met. We were both a little wild and crazy and sort of outrageous and challenge the dominant paradigm. And this, and then when we got married and we had kids, she was like, "Okay, we're parents now, and we're gonna act like parents." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know we were gonna do that."
Right.
And I was like, "You've totally changed," and she was like, "You totally haven't." And I was like,
"This is a conversation, by the way, that people have all the time. This is the problem people have all the time.
I bet.
Like." All the time. I don't think I've met one couple, or I don't care if you're heterosexual or not, whatever, who cares? Everyone deals with this issue.
Right.
So what happened?
So I mean, I don't believe in rules, and I think, Christy, my wife, she came from, her family was like the opposite of my family, right? Like, she came from this very upper middle class, white, sophisticated, highly educated, very successful family that did everything right, and they also had 3 kids and so on, and I won't go into too many details about her story because that's hers to tell, but basically what I learned is that the product of our parenting, or our being parented, and the product of our life and growing up, didn't make one of us better than the other. She's more successful at some things. I'm more successful at other things. I think a lot of the difficult times I went through actually really built resilience in me. I think the difficult time that my mother had through the divorce, I think I ended up playing this role where I found myself always trying to make her laugh or help her see the bright side of things. And I think that ended up sort of becoming part of who I am. I'm a wildly optimistic person all the time. I'm somebody who never dwells. I'm like I don't complain ever. And it's not like I don't complain because I'm a doormat. I don't complain because I'm like, well, I have my arms, my legs, and I'm walking. Like
Good attitude.
So I have so, and I feel like I don't know exactly how I became who I am, but certainly grit and challenge and things not being ideal, I think can actually help season and develop a kid. And so where she wanted them to have this very sort of cookie cutter life, and I think there is some of it to being gay, like, well, if we're going to be, lesbian parents, we need to be excellent parents, and like we're going to be role models, and so maybe some of it is that. But for me, I was like, no.
Do you see that a lot though, like in your community then, or?
Strangely, I haven't seen it. I haven't really seen it that much with gay people. Like I'm saying it like I've seen it, but I don't really think I've totally seen it. I have seen it with like immigrant parents or like second generation where there's a little bit of that, like wanting to fit into like being like American. I haven't seen it too much, but I feel like that was like that with her a little bit, and maybe a little bit like dynamic. That with the family, like we can do everything like you guys, and so but for me, whether I was with a woman or a man or anything, like I just don't believe in those rules.
So if you don't believe in rules, does that mean you don't believe in kids having routine, structure, or where do you mean by rules?
Where do I draw the line?
Yeah, where is the line drawn? Especially with kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
So where I draw the line is if somebody says like you should or shouldn't do this, right? Like for me, like there's got to be some proof to it. Like if somebody says,
that makes
like,
more, yeah.
if I learn that kids having routines is actually helpful to their development,
right?
Then I will do my best to provide a routine for them, right?
So do they have a routine?
Yeah, they totally have a routine. Well, also Christy's a stay-at-home mom, and she's very very good at that stuff. So, but when it comes to like values, good or bad, or things that could be oppressive, like, oh, you shouldn't do that because it's not, that's where I get a little weird.
Okay, that makes sense though. So it's not just like a free for all, right? It's not like that. It's just more about, okay, so give me an example. Give me one of those examples. Don't do this or that, where it would be.
So,
it sounds like you have an open mind, if anything. It just sounds you're very open-minded and you're willing to listen to something that's opposing than what people's just, you don't just take something for face value, is what it sounds like to me.
I don't take something for face value, and I just consider possibilities, right? So, okay, one example would be arguing in front of your kids.
Okay.
So, Christy might say, well, we can't argue in front of the kids. I'm like, no, they should hear different points of view.
Right.
I mean, if we're not being mean or insulting
right.
each other, like I think it's helpful for them to know that you can have contrary points of view. And
right.
I think that will help them shape who they are and develop their points of view.
Right.
Things like socializing or drinking, it's like some of my best times were when my parents had huge parties and, they would, relegate us to like a bedroom, and we would be in the bedroom watching a show, but then we would want to sneak out and see what was going on. Like, to me, those were really fun times.
Exactly. So it's also because it's all experience-based. It's like your experience was a positive, so you're just taking that,
right.
and it's living with you in your adult life.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So some of those things that somebody might assume were bad, actually, for me, were very helpful and developmental. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe there are more of those things.
Right.
I think...
You're a product of your environment in a little bit,
yeah.
right? Like, I think like anybody is, right?
For sure.
So then how do you balance, and I hate that because I feel like everyone always, how do you balance, life and parenting? But do you have like tricks or tips to kind of balance, especially when like we're talking about like you have a different parenting style, like that comes with a whole other laundry list of stuff that happens at home.
Sure.
Then you have work and like, it's not like you're a coordinator, like you're running a company that's growing quickly.
So I don't balance.
Thank God you said that.
Yeah, I don't really believe in balance. I
think it's a myth, to be honest with you.
Well, it's
not my
it's a myth, and it's like it's sort of a pre-assumed goal. For me, the goal isn't balance.
Right.
For me, the goal is like living, like the whole thing being all in or being all out. So for me, it's like, if I want to do something and it's important to me, then I'll do it. Because if I don't do it, I'll be resentful about it, right? If I don't want to do something, if I get invited to an event and I don't want to go, then I'll just say, no, sorry, I'm not into it.
Right.
And I don't feel guilty about it because I'm like, well, if I go and I don't want to go, then like how am I going to show up there?
Don't you? I mean, I feel like I do that all the time, though. I feel like I'm always doing stuff that I don't want to do because I feel like this internal obligation. You don't get that feeling?
No.
God,
I mean,
you're lucky.
sometimes with work, I will just because it's like, okay, I know, like, I know I should go on this like habits and hustle podcast.
I was waiting for that.
But no, I mean, I think for work, there are definitely times when it's like we all have to do things we don't want to do, whatever
Right.
that is, and we all have a different list of those things. But in my personal life, no, I don't, because I always want to be the best version of myself, and it's if that's being compromised because of resentment or like feeling like I'm missing out on something or because I don't want to get in trouble, like whatever those things might be, then I'm just going to compromise who I am, and then like why even be alive?
Right. Listen, I'm hearing everything you're saying, and I tend to agree with a lot of it. So then, what did you have a time? Do you have like what's your schedule like? Give me like a day in the life of you. Like, what do you do? What time do you wake up? What do you do for routines and habits? And
I wake up at exactly 6 a.m. every day because that's when my son wakes me up.
okay.
Complete clockwork. And then I will go make coffee, and then I'll come upstairs, and both kids will get in bed, and they'll be allowed to watch one show
in the morning.
It has to be
Wow.
a PBS Kids show.
Okay. What show do they like to watch? at 6?
Right now they're really into.
That's just my own personal curiosity.
Yeah, right now they're really into. Well, they really love Super Monsters, and they really love Molly of Denali.
Oh, really?
Molly of Denali, yeah. So
I've got six
show
year
yeah,
old. That's
show
why I
about
thought it'd be
girl
the same.
in Alaska. And then I'll like look at my phone for a little while just to see if I missed anything urgent, and then if it's a good day, I'll go for a run around the lake. I live by the Silver Lake Reservoir. And then I'll come home, go to work, and then
What time do you start work?
I'm in the office usually around 9.
And then what time do you leave around?
Totally different every day.
Every day.
Every
Do you
day.
work from home sometimes? Like, what is the day? I want to know
Yeah.
because, like you said,
Yeah.
you seem so casual. Like, I feel like if I didn't know any better, I don't know. I would think that you were like just like kicking it here, and you're gonna like, I don't know, like just I don't know what I would think.
I know what you're saying only because other people say it.
Yeah.
But I don't have like even my team. Like I don't really care
You
where
don't
they
have a
are, what they're
regimen or-
doing. No, I'm just like just do the job, do it really well, get it done on time.
Right.
So it's like people don't tell me like when they're going to be in the office and when they aren't.
So you're not micromanaging. That's not your style.
Oh my God, no.
So from what I get, like you're super decisive. From this podcast, I would say that your leadership style is you're very decisive, right?
Yes.
You don't dwell on anything. Whenever you make a decision, it's what it is, and that's what it is.
Yep.
What else? You hire very, very well, and you don't micromanage.
That's right.
You
Stay out of the way.
basically right. You stay out of the way and just help with obstacles. Okay, these are really great. These are great tactical things people can take as a leader that work for you.
Yep.
And you really don't have much of like a routine that's like I have to meditate every day. I have to eat broccoli and spinach at 11 o'clock. Like you don't have anything like that.
No.
Are you fanatical about eating tender greens every lunch?
Well,
You
I do
don't
eat
have to-
tender
don't
greens.
say
No,
yes
no.
because-
I do. Well, we cater into the office. So,
Oh, you do?
So
Okay.
when I'm in the
Do you like
office,
did you love it before?
I ate at Tender Greens 3 days a week before I started
So
working
you
there
did
for
okay,
years.
Fine. Okay, so you were so by the way, so before you worked at Peet's, you were a Peet's coffee
Yes.
drinker. Before
Yes.
you worked at Tender Greens, you were a Tender Greens eater. Did you go get your hair blown out at the Dry Bar before you worked at Dry Bar?
That's the only exception. So like I was an Apple user before Apple.
Right.
That's the only exception. My hair is pretty easy.
It looks great though. I thought for sure that you were like
Thank you.
still a
Thank you.
Dry
No,
Bar.
this is all me.
Wow.
I mean, I learned some tips and tricks. Don't get me wrong.
I would think so.
But this is tough for me because like obviously I spent many years there selling the dream, but I think for people who have very difficult hair, and a lot of people have really difficult hair and they don't want to take the time to do it, and so driving to a dry bar and getting a blowout is worth it to them. Sometimes they're working, and like we had lawyers who were like, I'm making money doing this, you know. So I think it's very useful, or for people going to events or things like that. But my hair's pretty easy, and so when I worked at Dry Bar, I would get blowouts. But even then, even though I could get a blowout whenever I wanted, I didn't get them as often as most people, just because my hair's not that hard to do.
Right.
But I understood it. I mean, I'm not like a super high maintenance woman, but I am into hair. Like I like really into hair products, and I've always cared about my hair. So it's like it was something I understood, but you know, I haven't gotten a blowout since I left.
Well, okay. Well, I'm not. Listen, I have one today, but I never do. I'm like very much au natural with that stuff.
It looks natural.
Yeah. Well, because I was just bored. I'm so sick of having the same look. I mean, I feel like I am Steve Jobs. Like I wear the same thing every day, a black shirt. Like I have I try to put as much stuff on autopilot so I don't have to think about it. You know, like
smart.
I wear the same thing every day. I eat the same thing. Like every single breakfast is the same. Every lunch is like a couple different options. Just I don't want to think about stuff like that. It's just it kind of saves space for things that are much more important in my life.
Well, I saw your lunch order was very specific.
Although I'm very particular.
You're very particular.
Because that's another reason, by the way. I'm very, very particular. And so some places can deal with it. Hopefully, I mean, we'll see today.
We'll see if they show up with the right food.
I know, right? Okay, so I guess that's basically it. You have nothing. Do you have anything you want to add to this lovely list of stuff?
No, I mean we've covered a lot of ground.
We covered a lot of ground. It says here, when it says after here, what are any unique rituals that you keep? You said that you love karaoke and you love.
Oh yeah, I built a karaoke room in my home.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Do you have like Japanese businessmen coming over all the time and having a session with you in there? Or?
No, it's funny that it didn't occur to me that should be part of it.
Yeah,
but
another revenue stream
amazing.
For you.
That's amazing.
Right?
That's an amazing idea. No, I actually would spend a lot of time at karaoke bars, and finally
that was not something I would ever expect coming from you. You're like literally surprising me with so many different things. I would never think you were a karaoke person. I was going to end this podcast right now with
oh my God.
And now you're telling me like this.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that this didn't get left out, because I would say it's probably one of the most. If I'm going to lead with anything, lesbian would be second to karaoke person.
Seriously?
Yes.
Okay. Why? You just love it?
I just love it. Because I think it brings the world together. I think karaoke.
It's true. People
karaoke could create world peace.
You know, I actually think you're actually onto something. Mm-hmm. Because how do you not have a good time when you're singing?
It's impossible.
With a bunch of other people, other friends, and whoever.
It's
a great bonding thing. It's a great thing to like. You should bring it into the Tender Greens office for like a employee bonding. Oh, I'm sure you have. That was probably like an obvious one, right? Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's another great leadership skill. Why don't maybe just karaoke with your employees?
Oh yeah. Well, that was sort of like my secret sauce that I didn't want to let out, but it's out there.
Well, now everyone's going to be doing it. Well, thank you. How do people find you if they're more curious and interested in the ways of
me?
Of Denyelle.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also Denyelle Bruno, at Denyelle Bruno on Instagram.
And tell people to go eat a salad and a piece of chicken.
Oh my gosh. Go if you like good food. And you haven't been to Tender Greens, you should absolutely go. We make all of our food fresh daily. We source from the highest quality farmers. All of our restaurants have an executive chef. You will get a 5-star meal for a 3-star price. And if you haven't been there yet, shame on you.
Right. I second that motion. Thank you. Thank you so much, Danielle. This was actually very fun. I'm very happy to have you on.
Yeah, it's very fun.
And, well, that's it, guys. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.